How's going guys, welcome to the channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Albedo and Shalltear. Huge shout out to Spartan-259 Raphael for this story. If you wants to see awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get into the video. Ainz was, he considered, to be a good man. At least, before he became what he was now. Some of him remained. Of the good man he once was, which is why he was sickened when he watched as a blonde child ran into their tomb. Of course, the others had spotted him long before he made it close, but he ordered the other denizens of Nazarick to watch for now. See what he does. What caught his attention, however, was the mob that was chasing the child. "My lord?" he heard Albedo ask as he continued to watch what was going on. He of course told them to make sure they got no further than the first floor, he wanted to see what was going on. It had only been a day or so since they had arrived at this new world and only just began scouting. Quite barbaric. To do this to a child. He was considering his options at the moment as he had remembered the scouting that Sebas had done not too long ago. They had arrived in a forest with a human settlement nearby which, from what Sebas had told him, were full of shinobi. He at the moment was considering his options before the human side of him had won out as he stands from his throne. "Come," he says as he grabs the staff of Ainz's old gown as she nods, making their way to the first floor via teleportation, as they teleported just a corridor or two down from the mob, who had finally caught up to the child and seemed to mercilessly beat and attempt to murder the 6-year-old child. He listened to what they were saying as he makes a motion to Albedo not to interfere just yet. If he has to, he'll revive the child, but at the moment he had to listen in. Gain some knowledge of this world. His human self wanted to rush in and protect the child, but his protectiveness of the denizens won out as he listened. "I demon. For the fourth. How dare you take my daughter? I'll put you down, demon." He had wondered what kind of child would be considered a demon as he shook his head as he grasped his staff harder. "How pitiful to harm a child," he spoke out as the humans turned to them as they gasped, some growl at him, ready to attack. "He ain't no child. You should know that, you demon." One of them calls out to him as they pull a katana out ready to strike him, but Ainz mentally rolls his eyes and raises his staff just enough. He felt their power levels, and they were barely level 10s at best. "Chain lightning." He calls out as the lightning sparks from his staff before striking the first human before jumping human to human, shocking them all and stopping all of their hearts before they drop dead. "Weak," he says as he walks over to the pile of corpses as he spots the child that was running from them. The child looked absolutely terrified of him, and for good reason. "Lord Ainz, why did you save this insect?" she says as she walks behind him, her eyes landing on the blonde child who sat quivering in the corner of the corridor they were in, whimpering. This caused Ainz to pause for a moment as he hums in thought. Why did he save this child? It was no business of his. Yes, it was barbaric, but barbarism was almost par for the course in the human world, as he chuckles softly and stands, almost reaching a decision. He first had to. What was that? Ainz felt the almost malicious energy coming from the child as this drew his curiosity as he watched the wounds heal before his eyes as he smiles. This child was becoming more and more interesting by the day as he walks over. "Can you speak, child?" He spoke out to him. The child seemed surprised for a moment before nodding, absolutely terrified of rising their ire, much like the villagers that had chased him here. "Yes." "Good. What is your name? Do you know why they chase you?" he asks him. "My name is Naruto. And I don't know. Usually Aji usually watches after me," he murmurs as Ainz nods at this. He wondered how strong whatever he contained was as hums in thought. "And who is your Aji, child?" the elder Lick asks curiously as this causes Albedo to look at her lord curiously, absolutely wondering what he had in mind for the child. She didn't agree with having this insect so close to her love. How filthy it was. "He's the leader of the village." He squeaks out as this causes Ainz's eyebrow to metaphorically raise, and if he could, he would be smiling even more. Potential to be powerful and the leader of a village. "Yes. This will do. Well then. I'm sure Hess worried about you," he says, reaching down and picking Naruto up and looking at Albedo. "Put Nazarick on the highest alert," he tells her as she nods, absolutely flabbergasted at the moment at what her lord was doing, but she brushes it off for now. She is thinking that he must have some plan in place, otherwise he wouldn't be doing what he was doing. "Ainz-sama, are you?" "Yes. Do not question me this time, Albedo, please. I will return. This is something I must do alone, but if you wish to keep track of me, use the mirror of remote viewing," he says as she nods as he then turns to Naruto. "Could you point me to your leader's place if I fly you above?" he asks the small human who nods at this. "I will return," he tells Albedo as they both teleports outside. Albedo sighs and nods before going to do what she was tasked to do. Hokage Tower. Hiruzen Sarutobi was considered to be the god of shinobi in his time. A true force to be reckoned with in his prime and can mow down companies of shinobi during the Third Shinobi War. He was a beacon for his people to aspire to and become greater than themselves, and to carry on the will of fire to the next generation and pass on his teacher's principles. He attempted to pass these on to every shinobi under his command now, especially now that he had to take up the mantle once more after the passing of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. He cursed lightly to himself. He wished that Minato had waited for him so that he would be able to seal the nine-tailed fox into Naruto. He was an old man. Minato shouldn't have given his life for the village. He looked out the window and wondered what he should have done differently. How he could have made this village better. Maybe he shouldn't have told anyone about Naruto. Maybe he should have cracked down on the councils. Maybe. Those words kept ringing in his head over and over again as he really wished he could have changed it all. He sighed to himself. "Are you alright, Hokage-sama?" asks one of his Anbu in the corner, which was Kat. Her long purple hair being a recognizable feature of the Anbu, as well as her cat mask. Just the misgivings of an old man. "I'll survive," he smiles at Kat before going back to his paperwork as he signs off on the next one before moving the papers before he watched as a portal open up in the room. He tensed up when he saw someone, or rather, something stepped out. It was a skeleton with large grand robes. But that isn't what caught his attention. It was who was in its arms that was, Naruto, bloody and shivering as her stood, ready to fight the monster that appeared before him as the other Anbu appeared in the room, weapons drawn and pointed at it as the skeleton looks around at the residents. Ainz of course felt their power. The old man that stood there in the room was level 50 alone, much too low for him to be any real threat, but still, he wanted to play it cautious with a child in his hand as he raised his free hand, the staff floating next to him, to placate them as he didn't want to fight. He saw this as an opportunity to expand. Hiruzen looked at the skeleton and assumed it was some kind of jutsu, but he could feel the power radiating off of it, and that concerned him, as well as what was in his arms at the moment. Naruto looked like he was asleep, almost content in its arms, which he could only assume that the lick had saved the boy. Too many questions, not enough answers. "Are you, as this boy refers to as, Aji?" he asks the old man, to which he was surprised that the skeleton could speak in all honesty, but at the same time he shouldn't be surprised as he continues to look at the lick for a moment longer before deciding to answer it, not wanting to draw its ire. "I am. My name is Hiruzen Sarutobi, the leader of this village. And who might you be?" Hiruzen was currently sweating from the massive amount of power that it was radiating, so he made no moves just yet, though he'd be damn sure to give it the old good try to get Naruto away from that thing. "My name is Ainz, old gown. And I am currently not happy," he tells the man seriously as Naruto snored lightly in his arms. He had put the boy to sleep after he had pointed out the location of the Hokage Tower as he called it, making sure to use a deep sleep spell as to not wake the boy with their conversation as his eyes glowed. "This boy, no older than 6 from what I can tell, comes into my tomb, running from a mob of adults, calling him a demon and attacking him as though he were an enemy. When I was human, this was very abhorrent behavior," he tells the leader, a stern looks in his eyes, despite his facial features lacking any real features. "It is abhorrent to us as well, Ainz-sama." He explains, hoping that the lick didn't ask any further, but things were never so simple, were they? "Then explain to me, why was he being chased? And if you know, why doesn't he have protection? Where are this boy's parents?" he asks the aged leader, who stared at the lick for a long time, wondering what to say or how to say it, but he suspected that he would know if he was lying as he sighs. "On. Both parents perished 6 years ago. As for why he was being chased, I will be frank with you, Ainz-sama, since Naruto is asleep at the moment. 6 years ago, a demon attacked the village and razing a good portion of it to the ground. In one last final move, the previous village leader sealed the beast within the boy, taking his own life," he explains, feeling it would be better than absolutely fucking murdered by this lick, who can no doubt raze Konoha to the ground. No. He wanted to stay on his good side at the moment. And as such they take their anger out on a child who had no control over what was done. He says, which causes Hiruzen to nod as Ainz hums in thought and looks at the boy as he tries to come up with a good explanation for him keeping him. He would rather not antagonize the village either. No, he had bigger plans for both of them as he then looks at the village leader. "You realize that Naruto is by now most likely traumatized from the abuse. No parents, abused and kicked out on the streets to run for his life. And you've done nothing," he says harshly. This causes Hiruzen to glare at the lick, not caring at the moment, since He's done everything Hes can given the circumstances. "I've done what I can for the boy, Ainz-sama. I've given him round-the-clock protection. Which was notably missing this night, it seems. No. I don't think the ones I killed tonight were regular civilians and shinobi. These are agents of someone that you failed to weed out, it seems. You are the village leader, act like it," he explains as he uses Aura of Despair to get the point across to him in the room. This also causes the Anbu to collapse to their knees, gasping for breath as Hiruzen was shaking, holding onto the table as though it were a lifeline. It's not that simple. Ainz-sama Hiruzen began as he was currently trying to keep from his heart from giving out at the moment as he licks his dry lips. He at the moment was absolutely terrified of the monster in the room, and for good reason it seems, and this was causing all of them to shake from the sheer oppressiveness from the aura. Then you are a weak and incompetent leader. No. I have made a decision. I am taking the boy with me, and should he wish it, he will return when your soldiers are set to graduate from their academy. Which is when. 16 Hiruzen calls out as he kept panting, the breath shaky. Eventually Ainz cut the aura, to which Hiruzen took a deep breath as he was trying to pull air into his lungs, almost as though he were an infant taking his first breath of his life, as he looks at the Lick who stood in front of him. I have no right to ask of this. But if he does wish to return, tell him I will tell him of his parentage. I would have told him by now, however I cannot disrespect the wishes of the dead Lord Ainz. I hope you understand. They asked me not to tell him until he was of sufficient power of age. Hiruzen practically begs knowing he can't do a damn thing to stop the Lick from taking the boy and decides to at least offer the carrot on a stick method, to which of course Ainz saw right through, but decided to play along with at the moment as he knew this would bring Naruto right back as he nods at this. Very well. 10 years Hiruzen Sarutobi. Get your village together by that time, or Naruto will no doubt not stay in the village that abused him. He sees you as a grandfather. Perhaps you should make sure that fear is not misplaced him. Ainz said as he opens the gate behind him and walks back into it. Hiruzen watches as the portal disappears as he sighs and runs a hand through his hair as he contemplated what to do at that moment. He wanted Naruto back, not just for the village, but for himself, as he wanted to watch his surrogate grandson take the world by storm as a Konoha shinobi, to leave his mark on the world like his parents did as he steeled himself and nods. Before go rest and recover. Send a new batch of Anbu. We have a lot of work to do. Break Tomb of Nazarick. Ainz steps through the portal, Naruto still in hand, and out into the office room where Albedo was waiting, along with Demiurge and Sebas. At the center was the mirror of remote viewing. They had watched and listened to the entirety of the conversation with the Hokage and were currently thinking about what their leader had planned at the moment. My lord. Demiurge began as he watches Ainz lay down Naruto on the available couch, the mirror disappearing so they could focus on their master in front of them. I'm sure you heard what I had told the leader. I will explain my intentions in a few moments. He says as he looks over to Sebas. Sebas, can you find clothes for this child, get him dressed and cleaned? The spell I put him under should keep him asleep through the entire process. If anything happens, contact me immediately. Do not wait. If anyone asks, he is a guest and is to be treated as the same respect as myself. Understood. He says as Sebas nods and gives a bow. Understood. By your word my lord, he says, walking over and picking up Naruto and heading out the door. Ainz mentally sighs as he had a seat at the desk as the other two stand and make their way over to stand in front of the desk. As I said, I will explain what I have in mind for the boy and I will be upfront about all of it. As you both know. I am a Lick. I cannot sire any heirs, much to Nazarick's dismay I'm sure. He says as Albedo was about to say something, but he raised his hand to stop her from speaking as he looks at her. Albedo. I am being realistic here. Regardless. That boy has something within him. A demon. But that is not why I am to make him my heir, should he accept. I have to speak with him. He explains. What do you mean my lord, if he contains a demon, would he not be better than most insects? Stronger. Albedo asks, wondering where her lord was going with this at the moment. Yes, but I have an idea about the demon. Regardless, he has something about him. Potential. He has potential to surpass me one day. He explains as the two of their eyes widen at this, surprised to hear about this. But the child is only human, how could he have began Demiurge before Ainz raised his hand again to once more stop him from speaking. It's true. As I said before, should he accept, he will be my heir should there come a time where I no longer be here. What he does then, will be his decision, and I hope you all can accept that when the time comes. Of course, my lord. It would be an honor to serve the heir of my love, Albedo says. Good. As I said, we need to speak with him first. Ainz says as the two nod and wait patiently for Sebas to return with the boy. 30 minutes later. Ainz watches as Sebas brings back Naruto in brand new clothes, as well as clean and washed, and lays him back down on the couch as the three looks at him. Ainz steps up from his chair and makes his way over to the boy and waves his hand over his head to dispel the magic that kept the boy asleep as the three watch. Eventually Naruto began to stir once more before looking at Ainz. Ainz-sama. He murmurs out, having gotten the idea of showing the skeleton the proper respect given that he was saved by him as he sat up, looking down at his now clean body. Where am I? Ainz pondered how to answer this, but decided that the straightforward approach was the best as he looks at him. We are in the Great Tomb of Nazarick. My home. Welcome young Naruto, he says as he made sure to tell the others not to say a word until he accepted or declined the offer. "Oh, I'm sorry about running in here earlier, I just wanted to get away," he murmurs softly as he looks down at his lap. Albedo wanted to desperately demand that the child look him in the eyes when he spoke, but Demiurge reaches over and tugs at her clothing to keep her quiet for now, not wanting to scare the child that Ainz had put his faith in. "It's quite alright. It's quite understandable given the circumstances, but I wish to skip straight to the point, Naruto. Those people might not have seen it, but I see something in you quite special. I'm a demon, right? Is that why you guys took me in?" He murmurs softly as this causes Ainz to let out a loud laugh at this, causing Naruto to quirk his eyebrow at the skeleton and shakes his head. "No, you are not a demon. At least, not yet. I wish to make you an offer, Naruto. I know that you are an orphan. No parents. No friends. I wish to offer you that. A family. In return, you will be my heir. To all of this." To Nazarick he says, motioning to the whole room around them, but Naruto felt there was more to it than that as he looks down at the child. "It is, however, a big decision," he began before he was hugged. "Yes." Naruto exclaimed, he didn't care where it came from, he just wanted a family to call his own, to say that this was his family. This had taken Ainz by surprise as he took a step back before it had caught up to him before he let out a loud laugh, bellowing out the room. "I'm surprised you said yes so quickly. Though not surprising given your upbringing. I promise you that this is no trick," he says, reaching down and patting the boy's head as Naruto began to weep into his robes, being given something that he had wanted for the longest time, and it put a smile on his face. It took a good half an hour of crying before he calmed down as Ainz looks down at the boy. "Alright. Do me a favor, Naruto, lie back on the bed and raise your shirt. I need to make sure of something," he says as Naruto, curious, does so as Ainz walks over to the couch and looks over the seal. "Demiurge, Albedo, come, I need your minds on this as well, if I wish to be certain," he says as the two nods. "Greetings, Lord Naruto. I am Demiurge," he says, bowing to the boy before moving to look over the seal with their master. "Hello, Naruto-sama, I am Albedo, it is good to meet you," she says with a smile before her face returned to the neutral expression as they all began to talk about the seal, as well as how to do something specific, as they didn't want their newest heir to be controlled, as Ainz hummed softly in thought. It was a very, very complex seal, and one that would need some careful planning as he taps a finger to his cheek, wondering how he was going to deal with it. Eventually, he had an idea as he stands. "Albedo, Sebas, Demiurge, I need for you to stand back." "I know what to do," Ainz says as the three of them nod and done exactly that as Ainz began to set up protective wards and the like. He was sure he wouldn't need them, but he had to make sure he didn't want the fox to break out of its seal, kill their heir and wreak havoc from within. So he had to be 100% sure of what he was doing before he had done it as he looks at the seal. "This will be painful, Naruto. I apologize," he says as he points a palm to Naruto as magic gathered in his palm. "Magic drain, magic break, cocoon." He calls out the three spells as a cocoon of magic surrounded Naruto as the seal breaks. Naruto's screams could be heard as the seal breaks, releasing all the yokai energy into the cocoon and began to surround Naruto, making sure to use healing magic as well as to not kill the child. There was a lot of magic as he grips the staff even tighter in his other hand as he simply focused on keeping the cocoon in place as to not release the energy into the surrounding rooms. The screams intensified as more and more yokai was released from the seal into the cocoon and into the young 6-year-old's body. He winced as he could feel how much energy he had but kept going, deciding that whatever happens, happens. Eventually, and thankfully, the yokai finished pouring from the seal and into the boy's body as he had finally released the spells, he panting lightly as he watched as the new Naruto came into view. This time he had 2 orange fox ears on his head and on his body was 9 luscious flowing orange tails, power radiating off him much more than before as Ainz looks over the boy. Smiling if he could as he watches as the boy's chest moves up and down in shallow breaths. "It seems to have worked, which is expected of a supreme being such as yourself, Ainz-sama," Demiurge says as he walks over to the now unconscious Naruto and looks him over. He was much more than a simple human now. He was now another supreme being. One whom they would look to for guidance. "Of course, my love did it," Albedo says with a smile as Ainz, satisfied, looks at Sebas. "Tell everyone to gather in the throne room in an hour, Sebas. I believe we have an announcement to make," he says as Sebas bowed and made his way out of the room once more. Hanahagakure. Hiruzen Sarutobi was not usually an angry man. He liked to pride himself in his patience, but at the moment, that patience wore thin at the moment as he watches as the civilian and shinobi councils filed in, some demanding questions as to why they were pulled in so abruptly. He of course ignored them as he hums to himself, the only solace he was having was the thoughts of his own head. Some of the shinobi and a few of the civilians were nursing headaches. Once everyone has arrived, he knocked on the table a few times to get everyone's attention as he wanted to get the meeting over with for the night. Once it was settled down, Hiruzen looked satisfied. Good, you all made it. We have important matters to discuss regarding one Naruto Uzumaki as expected. A few of the civilians began to shout, while the others looked indifferent. There were 4 factions so to speak in Konoha, those that revered Naruto as a hero, which mainly consisted of the shinobi, those who were indifferent, which were half of the civilians, those who would have him exiled or executed, the other half, and those that would have him turned into a weapon, which were the advisors. Danzo was the most prominent of. I still don't understand why you don't hand him over to me, Hiruzen. Speaking of. Danzo spoke to him about this, to which Hiruzen growled lightly under his throat. He knew what Danzo was doing honestly, he was riling up the ones that hated Naruto into action, which they otherwise would have simply shunned the boy. He wasn't stupid, this was a shinobi village after all, but he had no evidence to after him at this time. Because his is a child Danzo, and I will not have an emotionally detached child, simply because he did not have a choice at his birth. No, I have come to give an update on where he was. A new, shall we say, benefactor has agreed to take him with him. Quiet, he roared when the civilians and the elders began to shout at him, but this quieting them down. Let me speak. He will return in 10 years, to which he will be given the shinobi exam if he so chooses. This is not up for debate. He is a man even I am not sure I can best. Regardless, he gave me this warning. If things do not improve for the boy, he will leave, seeing no point in a village that resents him in some way, shape or form. Not that I can blame him. He explains. And are you sure we can trust this man? Asked Kaishi, who had his fingers interlaced in front of him, to which Hiruzen shakes his head. I'm not sure. Not that I could stop him. I am simply warning you all now. If we lose Uzumaki-kun, it will be on your heads. And he will no doubt be much stronger than anyone here if what I felt was true. So, think on that. Dismissed, he says as he stands and walks out, leaving them to their thoughts. He'll continue to beat the point home until it sticks. 10 years have passed. 10 years since the day that Naruto had been brought in as the heir of Nazarick. He had been an excellent student, learning everything that they had taught him like a sponge. Ainz had wanted to make sure he was up to the task should something ever happen to him. And it seemed his intuition would be correct as he sighed to himself in thought. Ainz-sama? Albedo asks him as she heard him sigh, something he hardly ever does as they both watched Naruto train with Aura and Mare. He was a quick learner. Ainz looked on in pride, like a father would do to their child. It's quite sobering if he was honest. He was given all this power when he came to this world, for what reasons he didn't know, but he didn't work for any of it aside from in-game. But here. Naruto Uzumaki worked for every drop of power, he drove himself until he was almost broken, get healed and do it all over again. When he was merged with the beast, all he had was power, but no skill behind it, so they refined it into what they saw now. A diamond of an heir. Naruto had grown a lot in the last 10 years, his former blonde hair had turned into a nice crimson red, which he kept tied into a ponytail, his shining blue eyes gleaming with determination. His fangs very visible with each smile he gave. Unlike Ainz, who was a spellcaster, Naruto wore light armor, leather, which was enchanted to be able to match the highest tier light armors. Over the armor he wore an orange haori with black flames licking the bottom, and on the back was written the Great Tomb of Nazarick. His black combat boots dug into the floor with each step and fingerless gloves held each weapon firmly. He wondered what they would say if they found out he was dying. Yes. The great Ainz' old gown was dying. He had underestimated the beast when he had merged Naruto and it together and managed to take too much of its potent yokai into his body unknowingly. Not a lot. But enough, which cracked the sphere in his body, slowly leaking his power, and soon, within the day he suspected, he would be but a memory to everyone. He chuckles lightly to himself. He wouldn't be able to watch him graduate. Life was a cruel mistress at times. No signs of his friends. No signs of Yggdrasil. Nothing. He hums to himself as he looked over to Albedo. It was time to tell them. His time grew short. Call everyone to the throne room. I have an announcement, he says to her as she nods, putting 2 fingers to her ear as he was now lost in thought at the moment. Maybe this way he'll see his friends again. Tell them about what he had done. Throne room. Ainz watches as the guardians file in, he mentally preparing himself as Naruto stood next to him, looking at Ainz curiously as he was wondering what he was doing. Ainz looks over them as they were all bowing as per usual as he closes his eyes. Trying to think of how to word this. How to word any of this because it would be hard to tell them. He saw them as his children, and to tell them that their father is passing is no easy feat. I wish to begin with a simple statement. I don't regret any of this. Seeing you all grow. Become your own people. Both the creations of my friends and Naruto. He says, getting some curious looks from the others, wondering what prompted this as he sighs to himself as he began to remove the rings he had on his hand, motioning Naruto over and hands them to him. I'm proud of you, he says as Naruto beams at this, his 9 tails moving in content behind him, the tails nice and luxurious with how clean he kept them. Ainz-sama. Shalltear asks, concerned at where he was going with this, seeming like he was resigning himself to his fate. To which she was correct. I will not be here much longer. I can feel my life force leaving my body. No, there is no way to fix it, I've already tried and resigned myself to my fate, he tells them as this caused an uproar of questions and statements, before Ainz raised his hand once more and looks at the denizens, smiling that they all showed some level of concern for him. I'm content with this. Perhaps I'll see my friends again. My family. And as such, I am leaving my position to Naruto. Please, treat him with the same respect you show me. He is my son after all, he says, finally admitting he was more than an heir. Why didn't you tell us earlier? Naruto asks, looking down, his red hair covering his eyes. There was a stray tear or two as he was trying to come to terms with what Ainz was saying. Ainz at the moment was channeling Sasuke, truth be told, but he didn't care. He knew this would be his final day. He wanted to leave them with someone he can trust. Because I knew it would hurt. I wanted to enjoy my time with you all. Not worrying about when my final day would be. Perhaps I will be reborn here. Who can say? All I can say is that I enjoyed my time with all of you. And when I pass, I hope that I will remain in your hearts. You will forever remain in our hearts, my lord. You stayed with us when no one else did. You gave us an heir to look up to. I am sorry that you will not make it to see his progress, Sebas says, his head down, he clearly distressed at the news, but he kept going. I know. To see the fruits of our labor. Regardless. I am content with what has come to pass. I pass the torch on to my son. To take care of you all. He says with a small hum and closes his eyes. We wish you didn't have to go, my love, Albedo whispers, her tears streaming down her face as she tried everything not to jump all over him and cry her eyes out. I know, Albedo. But now you have Naruto. I am at ease at that. He says with a smile, at least, that's what his tone conveyed. But I wish to give you all one last gift before I go. He says as he pulls out one last item from his inventory. It was usually a last resort item to change one's race mid-battle to gain the advantage, at the cost of half the user's life after the battle. It was a potion as he pops it open and drank it. It wasn't long before the lick shone and changed form, and before long, he shrunk as he looks down at himself after too long. Before I became the lick I was. This is who I used to be. Sasuke Satoru. He says as he looks at himself, at his hands one last time, as he could feel the life force dripping away from his body. This is the first breath has taken in over 10 years. He didn't care. He was Sasuke once more. You're still a supreme being, my lord. You've rose above your previous race, Demiurge says with a neutral expression. He was distraught as the rest of them, but he hid it well, behind a very good poker face. Yeah. You and the others created us as we are. You became a supreme being by your hard work. Aura says as tears streamed down her face. Thank you. That means a lot for you all to say. I'm proud of you all. As I keep saying, he chuckles as he grips his chest and sighs. This is it. Look after one another. I love you all, he says as he closes his eyes as he took one last inhale before his breathing halted. Naruto rubbed his tears and sighs lightly. Damn it. Naruto yells out, his hands gripping the staff. If it was any other metal it would have buckled, but it being a magical weapon it held firm as tears rolled down his face as he sighs, taking a deep breath to calm himself. Sebas, take Lord Ainz. We will give him a burial. Sebas nods as he walks over to the now human form of Ainz and picks him up as they all left the throne room with heavy hearts. 3 months later. Naruto sighs as he sat in the throne that was once occupied by his father. He rubs his face as he was still grieving, some of the denizens seeming to take it much better than others, but slowly, things seemed to be going back to some semblance of normalcy. Albedo kept up a tomb while he was still training, or he is helping in other areas. The others have taken Ainz's last words to heart, seeming looking at him like a supreme being and revering him. He chuckles to himself, they are viewing him as some god. Which worked for him if he was 100% honest. Not to say that the power would go to his head, but he understood why they did, he saw it as him earning his place to sit at the throne where Ainz once sat. He hums to himself in thought as he ran a hand through his hair. What are you thinking, my love? He heard Albedo ask. He wondered why she shifted her love so quickly, but also understood at the same time. He was Ainz's heir. His child. He never reciprocated her feelings because he felt she was his child and because he couldn't. She was no doubt still grieving hard, but she had someone to latch onto. He needed time to come to terms with what his own feelings on her was, but he wasn't putting off the table of reciprocating them. He wondered if the same happened with Shalltear. She loved Ainz as well. Did she latch onto him as part of the grieving process or because there was legitimate attraction? He had to wonder in all honesty. Regardless, he leaned back in his chair as he rubbed his chin in thought as he had been thinking of what he could do with Nazarick. He didn't want to keep them in the tomb all day and night if he were honest. It would drive some of them stir crazy, himself as well. No. he had bigger ambitions. One that would cement his father's legacy throughout the world. Albedo, do me a favor and call Demiurge. I want to plan something out with him, as well as Pandora's actor. If we are going to do what I have planned, I want to do it right, he says to her with a smile. Understood. Yes. He had big plans for the world. Hokage's office, next day. The Hokage was a patient man. At least, he liked to think so. He waded through corpses during the Third Shinobi War. He killed hundreds in order to save his home, and he helped Minato become the fourth Hokage. Some of which required a lot of patience, and it seemed to be paid off in spades with how he had started running the village. He had to deal with the idiots who thought they could try ripping off the shinobi by sneaking in missions that were lower rank than they were worth. Sneaking in laws that increased more power to the civilians or the like. It took his entire willpower not to simply disband the civilian council and just keep a few on as advisors for the civilians, but he knew that it would cause an uproar. They needed the civilians for business, believe it or not, so for the moment he kept the civilian council in play. However, that didn't mean he had to like it. He sighed to himself as he leans back in his chair as he looks up at the ceiling and chuckles to himself. It had been 10 years to the day since Naruto had left, and he was wondering what he was doing right about now. He had been told not to maintain contact. Not to be cruel, from what Ainz said, but to surprise the village elder. He wanted Naruto to show how strong he had become on his own merits. As if on cue, a portal opens up as Hiruzen smiles. It's the same type of portal that Ainz walked out. What surprised him, however, is Naruto and his 9 flowing tails behind him. Behind him stepped out Yuri Alpha as he stopped for a moment and picks up his pipe that he had been smoking out of and looks at it, looking back at Naruto. Before taking a sniff of the tobacco that he had placed inside of it. I'm all real, old man. Me and these tails, he says with a smirk as Hiruzen was too busy staring for a moment longer before it finally kicked in as he stands and smiles, walking over to the 16-year-old as he looked him over. You've grown, Naruto-kun, he says, pulling him into a hug to which the other hugged him back. He understood what the old man had tried to do for him. It didn't work, of course, but he tried his best and that's all that mattered. It was a moment longer before the two separated. Where is Ainz-sama? He asks curiously as he made his way back over to his desk as Naruto and Yuri winced at the question. He passed, leaving me as the leader of the Great Tomb of Nazarick, he explains as Yuri looked down in respect as Hiruzen did the same. He barely knew the lick, but he could tell that to the two of them, they meant a great deal, so he decided that he could at least offer his condolences by bowing his head. It wasn't long after that he looked up at Naruto. What will you do now, my boy? He asks as he takes another puff of his pipe and leans back, wondering what to do about them. For now, if Naruto was in charge, then that means that he had some influence over Nazarick. At least he thought so. I'll go take the exam, much like I promised 10 years ago, and become a shinobi of the village, see if this village is deserving of my protection. He says as Hiruzen nods, sighing lightly as he knew he'd have to deal with the shinobi council. May I ask, my boy, how you got those tails? We will have to explain those, you know, he says as Naruto nods. He strokes one tail. Ainz-sama had merged me and the QB, feeling that it would be riskier to have me contain it than me learning how to control it and become my own supreme being, he says as this causes Hiruzen to raise an eyebrow, but otherwise says nothing as he takes another puff of his pipe as he contemplates something as he looks at Naruto. Alright, when you pass the genin exams today, Naruto-kun. I will tell you something that you are entitled to know. Though it will be at the council meeting, as we both know they are going to demand what happened to you, how you got those tails and everything, and some may try and attack you. He explains as Naruto nods. Respectfully, Hokage-sama, they will have to get through me first if they wish to harm Naruto-sama, she says, stepping forward and pushes her glasses up as Hiruzen nods at this as he smiles back at the boy. For what it's worth, Naruto-kun. It's nice to have you back. It's up to you, however, if you wish to stay, but I hope you do. He says as he grabs a piece of paper and began to write on it, stamping it with the Hokage seal as he then hands it to Naruto. Take this. Hand it to one Iruka Yamino. If there's any issues, let me know, he says to him as Naruto nods. Let's go, Yuri. Yes, Naruto-sama, she says, following close behind. Shinobi Academy, 10 minutes later. Naruto honestly ignored all the looks he was getting, some of disgust, others of intrigue, which had went a lot better than he had thought as he knew some would downright hate him. It was still recent after all, though he supposed 16 years is a long time to get over something for those who had nothing to lose that day, they just saw it as an attack. While others who had lost something that day absolutely despised him with his 9 flowing tails. Not that he cared, he could wipe the village off the face of the earth, but he had bigger plans for it. He stepped into the academy and walked straight up to the teacher, who blinked at the new student and then silently glared when he realized that he had 9 tails. Behind him stepped Yuri Alpha, eyes glancing around the room as she took it all in. Do not mistake me for my predecessor, Yamino-san. was all he said as he took the paper and looks it over before sighing. This day was just going to get worse and worse for Iruka, wasn't it? Was too late to go take the Jonin exams. Have a seat, the Uzumaki-san. It seems we have a new student today class for the exams, he explains as this causes an uproar as he waits for it to die down. That's not fair. Yeah. Why does he get to come in and take it? I bet those tales are fake. Quiet. Iruka, getting tired of it, roared to quiet down the rest of the class, really not wanting to deal with it at the moment. The class silenced down as Naruto had a seat next to Sakura, who was looking at him with a mix of curiosity and anger for being able to simply skip the academy altogether, to which he pointedly ignored. Behind him stood Yuri, dutifully ready to intercept any threat to her charge. He was recommended by someone to skip the academy, and the Hokage signed off on it, so if you have any issues, take it up with the Hokage. He says as his eyes wandered around the room before nodding in content at this. After he had finished taking roll call, he puts the notepad down. Alright, we will be first having a written exam, a projectile exam, then a jutsu exam. He says as he picked up a stack of papers before he began to hand them out. It wasn't long before the other teacher had walked in. Naruto paid him no mind as he had received the exam and began to do it without a second thought. Are you sure you want to do this, Naruto-koi? He heard Albedo call out to him via message as she was keeping an eye on him with a mirror once more. I'm sure. By becoming a soldier of the leaf, this allows me to gain the trust of the village and use them as a chess piece in the game I have planned, Naruto responded back. It just seems so degrading for you to do menial work like this, to be with the foot soldiers when you are clearly so much more, Albedo says with a soft sigh, not exactly happy with what was happening, but she knew Naruto had plans so she went along with it, but she still voiced some concerns. It isn't. It just means I'm playing my part in the grand scheme of things. Was all he said as he flipped the page on the test and continued to do it. Understood was all she said as he continued the test before finishing it and setting down his pencil and nodding in content at this. He watched as the teacher eventually called time and began to pick up the tests from the students. Alright. Everyone outside and we can begin the projectile tests. Iruka calls out, his eyes glancing over to Naruto occasionally, to which Naruto rolled his eyes and made his way outside. Outside stood 3 targets for the students to hit. Naruto hums in thought. I'll call you one by one and you come up and throw the shuriken and kunai. Questions? No. Alright, first we have Shino Aburami, to which Naruto perked up. He had done some recon on who his potential allies would be so that he didn't come unprepared for everything and had himself, Demiurge, and Pandora's actor go over all the profiles as to assess their potential. The Aburami heir was an interesting one from what he remembered, and Toma had actually taken an interest in the Aburami clan, which could be construed as a good thing or bad thing, depending on who you ask. To him, it was a good thing, since it opens the possibilities for Nazarick to grow even more powerful if they gain the abilities of the ones of the Kakachu. Exploding. Energy draining. The list goes on, but if he could get some for Intoma, then that would greatly increase the strategic advantage of Nazarick. Aburami scored a solid 8 out of 10. He watched as Shikamaru had stepped up. Another interesting one. The Naras were a clan of geniuses with the ability to manipulate shadows, which was of interest to him for Nazarick. For both quirks of the clan, as not only could he use more intelligent people in Nazarick's halls, but the ability to manipulate shadows and control people could be invaluable for capturing people. Of course, he also had to ensure the loyalty of everyone before he brought them as servants or minions. There was no way they'd be at the same level as guardians. The guardians were his family. Next, he watched as Hinata stepped forward. Yet another interesting clan. The ability to see in a near 360 around them and through walls, it would be an invaluable intelligence gathering tool. Of course, they'd have to deal with the division in the clan, but at the moment that was a long-term goal rather than something to deal with right now. Hinata seemed meek, but able to put up a fight if her score was anything to go by, a solid 8. If she could work on that shyness and build some confidence, then she'd be a force to be reckoned with. Last but not least of those that interest him was Ino Yamanaka. Mindwalkers. Another invaluable intelligence-gathering clan from what he could tell, but much like the Naras, they could control people by taking them over if their will was weak enough or the targets were strong enough to push her out. Of course, this would put Uranus out of a job, but it would be fascinating nonetheless to gain the support of the Yamanaka. It was a good thing that Demiurge had taught him everything he could about politics and how to play them. Uzumaki Naruto Iruka called out as he nods as he walks forward and pulled 3 kunai from his pouch and steps forward to the line where they were throwing their kunai, and with one swift motion, he threw all 3 of them with precision, embedding themselves deep into their targets, right on the bullseye. Nodding in content, he pulls out 6 shuriken and throws them all at once, much like the kunai, and embeds themselves deep into the target. A perfect score. He was glad that he had taken up how to handle knives from a few of the guardians. "Good job, Naruto," Iruka said, not realizing he had called him by his name. Naruto raised a brow at this initially and wondered if what he had said had struck a chord with the Chunin. Regardless, he nodded in satisfaction as Yuri smiles at him at this as they watch as the others began to take their tests as they wait patiently. Though of course it wasn't long before they had gotten an unexpected visitor in the form of an Anbu. "Uzumaki Naruto. The Hokage has requested your presence in the council chambers," Kat says as Naruto nods. "I'll be there," he says as the Anbu nods and disappears. He makes a portal with his magic as he makes his way to the council chambers as he had been requested. He was going to need a drink. Or 5. Kami preserve him. Council chambers. Hiruzen usually felt like a patient man. But at the moment, he wasn't as he was being yelled at by not only his advisors, but half the civilian council and the other half was looking downright shamed at being associated with the morons. The shinobi council of course at the moment was looking bored. He felt the portal open up behind him as he smiles when he turned to see Naruto walking out with his bodyguard in tow, causing some of the civilians to leer at her in lust, while the others look at Naruto disdainfully at the moment. "Sorry for pulling you out of your exam so early, Naruto. I was planning to call you after I had explained everything to them, but they wanted to see what the commotion was about from a few of the civilians that saw you," Hiruzen explains as Naruto nods and steps forward. "Alright, let me get this out the way now since I know you are all going to ask her go ape shit or shit like that, and I don't want you yelling at me for it. No, I am not the QB. I was merged with his energy and his consciousness remains, but otherwise, this power is all me and all mine's. I am able to wipe out the village if I wanted to. I could have my subordinates raze it to the ground. This is not a threat. This is me stating how powerful we are," he says as this causes a few people to stop as they were about to start yelling at him. "What do you mean that the consciousness remains? Are you suggesting the old QB was intelligent?" Sue asks as she was currently leaning back and kicking her feet up off the table. He is, however, Hess now no more powerful than a regular fox. "Here is Ainz within Nazarick is all I will divulge," Naruto says with an almost bored expression as he puts his hands on his hips as Yuri looked dutiful as she looked around as her eyes landed on Danzo. Her sixth sense was going crazy about him, but otherwise she did nothing. She didn't want to jeopardize the plan that he had come up with. Though if ordered she would gladly kill him. Something about him rubbed her the wrong way. "Perhaps you can hand him to us to gain some closure to those who had lost their loved ones." "Hi," she asks as he looked at the two of them. He had used his eyes on the two and was forced to turn it off due to how much energy they were putting off. "Can't do that either, unfortunately, as he is currently with one of my subordinates." This causes Yuri to snort lightly. CZ Delta had seeming taken a liking to him and would often hold him when she wasn't on duty. "Regardless, this isn't why I brought him here. Naruto, I have something to give you. They are from your parents. One Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki," he says as he pulls 2 small scrolls before handing them over to Naruto, who was surprised. This caused a gasp to some of the council while others stared in disbelief. "I call a vote to invoke the Kra on Uzumaki." Naruto Danzo stands. Naruto watched as the entire council lost their absolute minds at this proclamation. Naruto was by no means stupid, he knew why he did this, he knew he was up to something and that he wanted more power. He however wouldn't play along with this as he gives the scrolls to Yuri, who rooked them in her left hand as she kept an eye on Danzo. "Absolutely not," Naruto said as he kept both of his shining blue eyes on the man, to which calmed the others down. When he finally spoke, he flares his killing intent to the others to forcefully calm down the rest who wanted to say something. Danzo however glared at him. "It is for the good of the village. Bring back the Uzumaki and Namikaze clans in one fell swoop. Why would you not go along with this, Uzumaki?" Danzo says, standing as Yuri steps closer to Naruto, ready to defend him as she glares back in return. Who was this man to question a supreme being? She was normally a good person, but this man pushed that to its absolute limit at the moment as she clenched her fists. "Because I'm not stupid, Danzo. Say you're right and I bring back the 2 clans here. Who would stop them from being kidnapped? Or harmed? I wasn't. I was harmed on a near daily basis when I was a child. No. If I am to have children, it will be under the protection of the halls of Nazarick, where those I trust the most will care for them. There is no way in hell am I letting my children live here. I came back as a shinobi as a sort of favor to my grandfather and now my parents. Otherwise, I would leave the village without a second thought. And none of you would be able to stop me. Understood?" He says, flaring his killing intent to the absolute max at Danzo, who looked ready to have a heart attack. The others however, felt a residual killing intent as they were sweating bullets at the moment. "Naruto, please. That's enough," Hiruzen calls out as Naruto nods, pulling back his killing intent as he sighs. "If you have any issues with me, you can take them up with my complaints department," he says, pointing to Yuri behind him, who pushed her glasses up as he looks at the council for a long moment. Otherwise, I will do my grandfather and parents proud and take up the mantle of Hokage when the time comes to honor their memory. He says as Yuri looks at Naruto, she knew there was more to the plan than just the Hokage hat. For the moment however, the hat was a stepping stone. And why would we accept you as Hokage? We would rather, began one of the more bigoted civilians before he was shut down by the Hokage. Should the time come and I decide to give the hat to Naruto-kun, then that is all there is to it, otherwise I still hold the hat. There are plenty of other candidates should I feel the need to retire. Hiruzen says, shutting them all down, glaring specifically at Danzo, as Hiruzen had made a mental note to write a will before too long, not wanting to take any chances with someone like him. The daimyo would never accept him. Homura spouted out. Not if me and the other advisors have anything to say about it. Naruto, looking bored and looks at Yuri. They die first then, he said as Yuri looks at her master. Would you like me to execute them now then? She asks, ready to do it as this causes the two advisors to pale. I would rather you not, my dear. They still have their uses. Though I'm currently struggling to find them at the moment. Hiruzen says as Naruto nods in affirmation at this. As for her, not absolutely the advisors. Regardless of where this conversation has gone, I am not enacting the craw for Naruto-kun. He wishes to focus on his shinobi career, and that is what I will give him. Should he find someone nice to settle down and bear him children, it will be up to him where they shall be raised. If you have any issues then please, by all means, take it up with Naruto's complaint department, he says, going along with Naruto's joke earlier as Yuri looked at them with what could be assumed was a kind smile, but they knew better. It was a challenge to them to actually try something. If that is all, I consider this matter dismissed, Naruto says as he creates a portal, making a note to read the letters that his parents had left him. The council was about to demand he come back, but by then he had already stepped through the portal and closed it behind him. I warned you all, as I will say. If he turns against us, I will haunt you all. Academy. Naruto stepped out of the portal once more and rubs his neck. He had teleported back to Nazarick to leave Yuri as he had a different job for her this time, and behind him stepped out Aura and Mare Bellafiora, the Dark Elf twins. There was a few stares to Mare as this causes Aura to snicker as she walks over and puts a hand on his shoulder. Don't worry about them, Mare, just focus on our job of protecting Naruto-sama. Alright. She says as this causes the boy to clutch his staff harder and nod at this as Naruto made his way back to the group. There was some whispering about the twins, but otherwise they stayed quiet as Iruka spoke up. Ah, you're back, welcome back, Iruka says with a small bow before debating on what to say. Naruto, if you can stay after class, I would like to speak with you, he says as Naruto nods at this, confident that the twins could protect him if need be, not to say he couldn't handle himself if the time came, but he felt a bit easier knowing that. Anyway. Onto the final portion of the exam, the jutsu. Exceptions have been made should the need arise, but for the most part I am confident most of you will pass, Iruka says with a small smile. Eventually he and Mizuki made their ways back to the other room and began to call the students to the back to test them as Naruto had a seat and waited his turn. So, who are they, Naruto? They're not here for the exams, I take it. Shikamaru says, walking up to him as the two looked at him, though they didn't do anything due to him not making any sudden movements just yet. They're my bodyguards. Don't be fooled by their appearances, I've seen them fight, and what they do to people isn't a pretty sight. He complimented as the two blushes at being complimented by a supreme being, but otherwise stayed vigilant. They look a bit young, Kiba says, leering at Mare, which causes Aura to snicker lightly since she knew why he was looking at her. Yeah, well, who asked you, huh? Aura says, putting her hands on her hips, and stood in front of her brother. Kiba raises his hands, not wanting to start a fight at the moment as he knew his ass would be kicked either by Naruto or the twins themselves, as he had an intuition that the three of them shouldn't be messed with if he was 100% honest. Itachi Uchiha graduated early, so did Kakashi Hatake. Do not mistake their age for inexperience, was all he had to say as the others nod. They still look weak. Sasuke says with a small shrug at the moment, his hands interlaced as he waited his turn, though his eyes looked over at the three. This causes Aura to growl lightly, but stopped when she felt Naruto's hand grab her shoulder to prevent her from attacking him. Before he patted it a few times, she blushed lightly at the contact, but nodded in affirmation at the silent orders, don't attack him. Though if she were honest, she didn't like it. Don't worry about the Uchiha-san, worry about your test, he says, which causes Sasuke to hum in affirmation before going silent and waited. Naruto didn't honestly know what to make of the Uchiha. He had heard of the massacre and was considering kidnapping the heir for the eyes, but decided it was too much trouble to be worth it. Should one go rogue, they didn't know the extent of the eyes, but of course that meant he had to be watched at all times, and Pandora's actor suspected that he would indeed go rogue should the right circumstances come up, and no doubt they will. Sasuke was a driven person to do whatever it took to achieve his goals. A man with nothing left to lose and driven to do whatever he had to. That made him dangerous, not to them of course, they could deal with a little shit. No. That made him dangerous to their plans. Uzumaki Naruto Iruka stepped out of the room as he stood, telling the twins to stay there, as he would be under examination. He could also handle himself should he be attacked, so in reality he wasn't worried. He made his way into the room as he didn't know the jutsu that they would ask him to do, but he knew the magic with similar effects and hoped it would be enough, which he was sure it was, as given the fact that Hiruzen wanted him to pass. Alright, we are going to ask you to perform 3 jutsu or similar, do that and you'll pass, Iruka says as he nods. Alright. The henge. Iruka says as he watches Naruto use a spell to shift his appearance into something else quite a few times before reverting to his old self. Good. Awamiri, he says as Naruto uses a teleportation spell on him and Mizuki, swapping their places before they both made their way back. Mizuki inwardly cursed since he had planned to use the QB brat on stealing the scroll for him. But he all but passed at this point as his mind began to work on how to do it, as he knew he couldn't do it himself since he would be hunted and killed by the Anbu. No, he had to get creative. Hello, Naruto calls out as Naruto once again used a spell to replicate himself a few times before they dissipated, as Iruka smiles as he reaches into the desk before pulling out a forehead protector and places it on the desk. Congrats. You pass. Like I said, do stay after class for me, will you? He says as Naruto nods as he walks over and grabs his forehead protector as he then slips it onto his leather jacket and made sure it was visible. Congrats, Naruto-sama. Yeah, congratulations, both Ora and Mare called out when they saw the forehead protector on their lord as he made his way back over to the desk and had a seat. He looked around the room to see who passed and who caught his interests. All of the heirs have passed from all the major clans, which in all honesty was no surprise given who their families were. There were a few civilians who passed, which was a bit of an accomplishment. This was going to be an interesting year, he could already feel it if he was 100% honest as he ran his hand through his crimson hair, his ears twitching occasionally. Truth be told, he was expecting a lot more scorn than what he was getting, not only from the class, but the other villagers. He just suspected that the attack was 16 years ago. It gave them all plenty of time to get over their grief, at least, the most of them, and the children wasn't there when the attack happened or remembered, given the fact that it was just that event to them. It wasn't long before Iruka and Mizuki made their way out of the testing room as Iruka stepped forward, a smile on his face as he looks around the room. I am glad to see those of you who passed the exam. To see you all grow from small children to fully realized shinobi, and I'm proud to be called your sensei. The will of fire burns bright in all of you, and I hope to see what becomes of you all in the following years as comrades in arms. He smiles at the class as he looks around the room. Come back tomorrow morning, 8 AM sharp, for your team placements. Mizuki calls out as the students nod and began to file out, Mizuki leaving not long after as the only ones who stayed behind were Naruto, Ora and Mare and Iruka. Iruka sighs as he rubbed his hands together in nervousness before stepping forward. He was a man of character. Ora and Mare were looking at the human in indifference, to be honest, as he wondered what he had to say to the supreme being that sat there. Naruto-san. I wish to be upfront with you. I had judged you when you did come in. I had put you with your predecessor because of your tales, and you're right, I shouldn't have judged you. For that I wish to apologize. I had lost my parents 16 years ago and had watched it defeated. Truth be told, I did have a lingering resentment for you when I had learned of who you are. But watching you today, talking with the others, I had come to realize that you're no monster. A monster would be attacking and killing everyone who had wronged you. For the way we treated you, and it's not right. He says, bowing to him. Naruto listened to what he had to say, and truth be told, he was very surprised given the fact. He had fully expected to be resented and even scorned by some of the villagers, some shinobi included, but this man had an introspection and deemed himself in the wrong and owned up to it. Naruto smiled and stood and makes his way over to Iruka and puts a hand on his shoulder. Don't worry about it then. We just met each other today, but you still felt the need to apologize for your actions, so that tells me what kind of man you are. I'm glad to see there are still good people in this village. He says, patting his shoulder a few times. Iruka listened to what he said and smiled in return as he rubs his neck at this. Oh well then, if you'd like, how about I treat you to some ramen? You and them. It's the least I can do, he said as Naruto looks back at the twins, who shrugged at this, not really sure what to make of it. If it was Albedo or Nabe, they would deny it, since they would be sure that the food they have would be poisoned or the like. Alright. Come on then, Naruto says. The Chirikus ramen stand. Hey Tucci, I brought someone new customers today, Iruka says as he steps into the small ramen stand. Iruka had been coming here for years as the owners were quite friendly if he were 100% honest. He enjoyed their company. Said owner steps out from the back. Hey Iruka, nice to see you brought some new friends, he says as his gaze looks over the 3 newcomers into the stand. Naruto was prepared to be thrown out into the street but was surprised when his smile became wider at this. Come on in then my boy, it'll make sure to get you some nice food. Sit down and I'll see what I can do to get you guys some good food. He says as he moves to grab his tools when he heard some of the other patrons speak out. You're gonna actually serve this demon? Yeah, he should be left out to starve, not given food. You lost my business, some of the patrons said. Well, I already have your money and he is a paying customer who can enjoy food like everyone else. If you have any issues with it, he says, grabbing a chef's knife and slams it down in the counter, embedding it into it. You can get the hell out and not come back, Tucci says as he looks as some stood and walked out of the restaurant as Naruto bowed his head appreciatively at this. It seems more and more good people were in this village than he had initially thought, and it gave him a little bit of hope. Now that we got that spot of dirty business out of the way, what can I get for you guys? He says with a smile. After placing their orders, he came back with their food as Aura and Mare began to chow down on the food with a gusto as Naruto chuckles to himself as Iruka too began to eat before he pauses and looks at Naruto. You know, Naruto, I've been meaning to ask how did he began before he heard a commotion outside the stand. One eventually peeks in and looks at Iruka. Iruka, Mizuki has stolen the forbidden scroll and the Hokage is calling on all active shinobi to hunt down and secure the scroll. One of the jonin says as this causes Iruka to stand. Mizuki? Really? Come on, Naruto. Right, he says, pulling out some money and putting it on the counter before he, Aura and Mare stood and rushed out of the stand. Naruto was quite surprised by this fact as he cursed, but then, this would also be a good time to secure his standing in the village as he smiles at this. Aura, Mare, see if you can find him, I want to find him before anyone else. He says to them as they nod in confirmation at this and began to search the village as Naruto jumped to the ceilings and looked around. Naruto hums in thought as he wondered exactly how he was going to play this. He had to be careful not to scare people either as he wanted to win the hearts and minds of the village for his plan, so he couldn't just execute Mizuki in front of everyone either as his mind was going 100 miles an hour as he continued to search for Mizuki. He doubted that Sarutobi would let him have Mizuki, so for the moment he simply decided to bring him back in cuffs in view of everyone as he ran a hand through his hair, and it wasn't long before Aura sent him a message. Naruto-sama, we found him. Hess headed due west. Aura calls out as she was following him. Don't let him escape. I'm on my way. He says to them before he rushed over to the west as he wanted to get this over with. Forest. Naruto appeared in the forest with a rush of speed as he came to a stop on one of the branches. He had rushed over as fast as he possibly could as he knew the sooner he had this fucker the sooner he could get rewarded. He stopped when he saw Aura and Mare surrounding him, he wrapped in vines as Aura sat on the scroll and smiled when she saw him enter the little clearing he had. Good job, Aura, Mare, remind me to reward you both when we return to Nazarick, he says as he walks over to the Chunin. He knew the vines around him would prevent him from using any jutsu, so he knew he was all well and caught today as he reaches down and pulls down the gag around his mouth. Why hello you little traitor to Konoha, he says with a knowing smile. Truth be told, Mizuki, I could have had them feed you to their little pets back at Nazarick, but you see now you gave me the golden opportunity to show them that I am more than my appendages and my heritage. I would tell them that I could have gutted you and ate you or whatever it is that they think demons do. But no, I have something much better planned. I hope you like the insight if Ibiki Zell. Though I wonder if Hokage-sama would let me keep you. Fuck you, he responded with an absolute sneer as he tried to break free of his restraints, but to no avail, this only caused them to dig even deeper as he groans in pain as Naruto smiles. No thanks. You're not my type. I'm as straight can be. Besides, even if I was, I wouldn't have the time. He says as he grabs him and lifts him up, putting the gag back on his mouth before Aura stepped forward. Wait, Naruto-sama, let me carry him, you shouldn't have to waste your time with this guy. It's alright, Aura, I got to make sure everyone sees after all, he says as she looks at him and then nods as they began to make their way to the Hokage's office, making sure to take the most populated road as she carried the scroll in her hands. Mare was making sure no one attacked them. Some of the shinobi were gawking while others seemed to be proud at this. He knew this was having the desired effect that he wanted. He had to speak to Demiurge about this and discuss possible ramifications to this, and if it would only speed up his plan, but for the moment, he relished in what positive attention he did receive. Of course, it wasn't long before the Anbu appeared and bowed in front of him. Cat as usual. One of the most trusted Anbu to Hokage-sama. For good reason too, as she was strong and forever loyal, so he trusted her. Uzumaki-san, I am to take Mizuki into custody and return the scroll to its rightful place. All shinobi are standing down now, she says as Naruto nods as he tosses Mizuki to her, to which she catches and Aura hands her the scroll as she nods thankfully before she disappeared with a body flicker as he nods in gratification. Alright, seems everything went well. He says as he looks up at the sky for a moment and hums in thought. He supposed it was time to head back and discuss things with the others to make sure things were going to plan. How did his father do this? Lord above these planning things sometimes was murder. Something he knew he'd have to do eventually too. Next day, Academy. Naruto was blushing at the moment. Which was surprising in all honesty, as it was hard to get any sort of reaction out of the boy usually, having to deal with Albedo and Shalltear flirting and fighting over him. He was pretty well insulated from most things that would fluster people. Most things. This morning he had woken up with Aura cuddling up to him. Not that he was complaining in all honesty. She was a beautiful woman, and having grown a little bit more since when she was the little girl that he had met her as, she had admitted to him that she cared for him like Albedo did, but much like Albedo, he told her that he had to come to terms with his feelings before he reciprocated anything. Of course, this caused a little spat between Albedo, Shalltear and her. Which he didn't mind. It kept things lively, as long as it didn't get physical. He didn't interfere, but simply watched on with amusement. At the moment he sat at the academy as he was slowly turning back to normal with his blush as he coughs into it as he smiles. He wondered what team the old man had put him on, though if he were honest, he didn't really need a team, so we'll have to see how that works. Behind him today stood Sebas as his guard for the day. He hadn't seen Iruka since last night, though he suspected he knew of what happened. Word usually travels quick in villages like these, so it wouldn't be really surprising. "Where's the cute girl that you came with yesterday, Naruto?" Kiba asked with a bit of a lecherous grin. He really didn't have much to worry about with Kiba. He was one of those harmless flirts that like to look and maybe date, but he had the feeling he wouldn't exactly force himself on someone. He had 2 women waiting at home who beat that out of his head, sure. It's just more surprising he came out as such a pervert. At home? She had duties to perform today, so I brought Sebas today. Trust me. Hess one hell of a butler, he says with a smirk. Kiba was about to respond when he watches the door open up as Iruka steps in and looks around, a clipboard in hand as he moves to the front of the class. "Alright, settle down. I have the team lists right here. Now please be quiet, you may all ask me questions after I read the lists," he calls out as he clears his throat as Naruto sat up a little further at this. He was sure the others were listening as well, so they could take all this into account. First team is Team 7 is Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno and Sai Shimura. Your sensei is Kakashi Hatake, he calls out. A frontline team from what he understood. Gain jutsu from Sakura with Sai, Kakashi and Sasuke being heavy hitters, though he suspected that there would be a ridiculously hard a team cohesion from the feeling he had. Sasuke was a loner, which was unsurprising. Sakura was a fangirl, would rather focus on her diet rather than train, and Sai, from what he had seen and heard, was one of Danzo's lackeys, so it would not be a good team. Team 8 is Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka and Shino Aburami. A tracking team, something he would be weary of being at the receiving end of should he ever decide to go rogue. Hinata's eyes could scout in a set location anywhere around here, while they had Kiba and Shino for tracking and the more traditional methods, while the mistress of Gain Jutsu from what he heard isn't a frontline fighter like some of the other sensei, rather capturing her opponents in an illusion and simply slitting their throats or using her limited jutsu to finish them off. Team 10 is Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akimichi, a capture and interrogation team. One that was modeled after the former trio of the previous generation, and one that worked well. Though he questioned if it would do as well as the others. For now, however, he had to take them at face value and determine how they would play into his plans. And if he played his cards right, everything can go well. He would have a strategist in the Nara and a good poison maker in the Yamanka. He was sure Nuranist would enjoy some of the poisons that he'll send her over. Last but not least. Uzumaki Naruto as Tatsubeku Genin, he says as Naruto looks at Iruka owlishly. He was backup. Naruto sighs as he rubbed the back of his head and looked at the door of the Hokage's office. He didn't want to make a scene and ruin the slowly gained reputation he was getting. Behind him stood Sebas as he watched his young master deliberate before Naruto said fuck it and stepped to the door and opens it with a small hum. "Hokage-sama, I wanted to discuss my position with you," he says in a serious tone as this causes the old man to look up. He was honestly expecting the visit from the young man if he was 100% honest. Hiruzen sighs as he sets down his pencil and nods as he motions for him to come in, to which Naruto nods thankfully as he steps in and closes the door behind him. Sebas of course closer behind as he kept close to his master. "Well, I wanted to discuss what it means to be Tatsubeku Genin. I didn't know there was such a rank, much less that I qualified for it," Naruto says, stepping forward as Hiruzen hums and nods at this, and he considers how to exactly to explain this. Tatsubeku Genin are usually much stronger and ready for the Chunin exams by the time they graduate, but are not certain enough to become Jonin. So, this is a compromise. Now, your duties will be to serve as backup for missions that go awry and train Genin who you see fit to train or help out in their training while we wait for the Chunin exams to come around so we could promote you, Hiruzen says as he picks up his pipe and takes a hit of it as he leans back in his seat. So, I'm basically backup for brats who get too in over their heads and make sure they come back in one piece, otherwise I'm just to make sure they're ready. Thanks Gramps, he says playfully as Hiruzen chuckles at this. Look at this way Naruto-kun, you can build your reputation by saving the lives of your fellow genin and chunin. Hiruzen says with a smile as this causes Naruto to give him a deadpan look at this. He certainly wasn't complaining. He wasn't beholden to a jonin teacher, but at the same time he knew he'd have to go out and save genin like Sasuke. God Kami must hate him at times. Troublesome. Alright. I just wanted that cleared up. I might watch some of the tests taking place, but otherwise I'll be around the tomb if you need me. He says as he gives the man a small bow before he turned on his heels and walks out, leaving the old man to himself in his own thoughts for the moment. A part of him was glad that Naruto had gotten a family like he had always wanted as a child, but he wondered that if the advisors kept poking the sleeping bear, that it would cause more issues and eventually have him leave the village. In that case he would be sure that Kushina would strangle him in the afterlife when he did pass on. He reaches up and touches his neck. Speaking of advisors, it wasn't long before there was another knock at the door and the three stepped in once more, and just like before, it seemed Danzo was leading the potpourri of pathetic that he calls old friends and advisors. What is it now Danzo? He asks with a slight edge in his voice and began to do the paperwork he had on his desk before signing off on it as he reaches for another one. I wish for you to reconsider handing me the Jinchuriki. He would be a valuable asset to the village if I am able to train him correctly, he began before Hiruzen looks at him and smiles, deciding to be petty for a change, and chuckles. I'll tell you what Danzo, if you have a death wish, go and ask Naruto-kun about what he wants to do, hell, be forceful if you want, but at this I will disavow any and all knowledge of this and tell the demons that reside in Nazarick that this was all you. The three of you. I will protect this village, and if you three seem hellbent on pissing them off, forgetting what they had done in the meeting, then by all means. I'll grab some popcorn and watch the show, he says with a smile as Danzo looks at Hiruzen. He wasn't stupid. He knew that this wasn't giving him permission. This was him daring Danzo to do something stupid, to which he would end up on the pike of the demons that resided in the tomb. His route couldn't get in no matter how hard they tried, and he couldn't outright order Hiruzen to hand him over, only advise him to hand over the demon, and he damn well knew that there was a snowball's chance in hell of that happening. Very well Hiruzen, damn that old man. But Demiurge. Demiurge was a resourceful man, he felt. He interpreted his lord's words for what he needed done. He wanted to please them and prove that he wasn't someone to be forgotten about or get bored of. He wanted to prove to the supreme beings that they were worth the effort, and right now, his goal was to please the one who stayed with them. At the very least the one who had left an heir behind for them. He smiles as he walks up to the operating table where a few of the humans from the village was. They were of course sent to recon the area, and he suspected they were trying to probe for defenses. Not unsurprising. Of course, these humans had seals on their tongue that prevented them from speaking out against their lord from what he understood. A splinter faction from what he could deduce. Ah, Demiurge. How goes breaking them? He heard someone call out. He turned to see that was Shalltear at the moment. Very well at the moment. From what we gathered, they spoke about what they could just to get the pain to stop, but that pesky seal is preventing them from speaking anymore. Perhaps if we remove the tongue and graft another one on. Though I suspect Danzo has a fallback plan in case that were to happen. Demiurge says the second part more to himself than anything as his mind was working 100 miles an hour. Why not simply go and kill this human that's been bugging us? She asks curiously and walks over to the root that was strapped to the table, out cold from shock, but still very much alive. Lord Naruto has a plan for him and for Konoha, so he must be kept alive at the moment, a pity, but for the moment he has some use, if for nothing more than as a target when the time comes, Demiurge says with a smile, a cruel smile. You never told everyone of your plan, Demiurge, is it to be kept secret right now? I suspect that Albedo and Pandora's actor knows. She asks as this causes Demiurge to nod his head at this. They were instrumental in concocting the plan that we have in place at the moment. It's not secret by any means, but we are making sure the machinations are working before telling everyone and how they can play their role. He says as this causes Shalltear to nod in satisfaction. How goes your quest to win Lord Naruto's affection, Shalltear? He asks her with a raised brow. We talked it out some and well, he said that he wants to be sure of his own feelings before coming to a decision. She says giddy-eyed, hoping that he'll pick her as his head wife. Which is understandable. His childhood before he became Lord Ainz's heir was no picnic. No doubt Lord Naruto will need multiple wives, I hope you and Albedo understand. Obviously we do, Demiurge. We might not be as smart as you, but we can read the writing on the wall. Just making sure, Shalltear. You have a good day. You are too. With Aura and Pleiades. Aura Bellifiora was an outgoing person usually, and this manifested in her usual tomboyish behavior. She loved to have a good time with people and smile and laugh. Her brother on the other hand was shy and meek, but by no means that he couldn't defend himself. Hell, she was 99% sure that he could beat her in a one-on-one fight most of the time, all things being equal. At the moment, she was currently a blushing mess as Shed started down some of the Pleiades battle maids. More specifically, Lapus Regina Beta, Narbril Gamma and Solution Gamma. Come on, it's no secret that you have the hots for Lord Naruto aura. All you have to do is walk up to him and plant a big one right on his lips and carry him off to his room. Lupa says with a grin which causes Aura to blush even harder. Sure, she grew a bit since she was the small loli that she was before, but that didn't mean she was stacked compared to say Albedo and Lapus Regina. I can't do that. It's indecent. Aura says, covering her face with her hands as she was currently fighting off a full body flush, trying not to think about her. Lord Naruto knew to top of no. Bad Aura. Yufufu Kmu and you know you want to. Lapus Regina says, her grin growing even more as she pokes Aura on the arm, only to get smacked by Narbril on the back of the head for her teasing as her usual stoic face was met. Do not force Aura into something that she doesn't want to do. Lapus Regina. Though I do recommend at the very least telling him. Albedo and Shalltear are pining for Lord Naruto's heart as well. I recommend hurrying it up if you wish to squeeze in. Though I suspect he will take multiple wives, he says as Aura was still blushing up a storm, as Solution was grinning as she looked at the young dark elf twin. Who's to say he won't pick one of us, you know? Lapus Regina says, putting her hand to her chin in thought before snickering at this, as Aura eventually managed to calm down, as she then glares at Lapus Regina for a moment before finally calming down and sighing. Alright. I'll be sure to tell him soon. Supreme Being knows he has a lot of women pining for his heart. She says with a grin. I'll beat them all to Naruto-sama's heart. She says with a grin before sighing to herself. She was usually a tomboy with no confidence issues. This is one of those times she did. But Yuri Alpha. Yuri Alpha was considered to be one of the better morally aligned characters within Nazarick. She felt sympathy for others and was able to connect to them much better than say Mare and Demiurge, who at best saw humans as insects. That's not to say that she didn't see them as insects in a sense, she saw them as people. She just knew that she and everyone in Nazarick was much better than most humans. She walked along the main roads of Konohagakure, she mainly there to gain some intel, but as well as pick up a few things for the chefs so that the others were able to eat. Usually, they hunted what they needed, but she knew that the food could get quite boring if the same thing was eaten over and over again as she headed into the store, giving the owner a smile before going to pick out her groceries before paying then walking out. She of course knew that there was some ninja following them as she sighs to herself, setting down the bags to floor and turns on her heels when she came face to face to the same man that she had come to view as distrustworthy in the council chambers. Can I help you, Advisor Shimura? Her eyes never left the one-eyed mummy of a man as she was aware of this man being needed in Lord Naruto's plans, but that didn't mean she couldn't kill the others that guarded him if they attacked her. I wish to speak to you about an offer if I may. I would like to offer you a position in my route, Miss Alpha, he says to her as he walks up to her, cane in hand as she rose an eyebrow at this. And what are you offering, Advisor? She asks curiously as she crosses her arms over her bust, her eyes not leaving the guards or him. Power. Connections, he says to her as she internally rolls her eyes and pushes her glasses up as she really wished she could end this man's life. I would have to decline, Advisor. I am quite aware of what you put your shinobi under. I am quite content with my lord, and I would not so easily betray him, if ever. So please, I will make myself scarce, she says, reaching down and picking up her groceries. Even if should cost you the life of your lord that you cherish so much? He asks with a grin as her usual stoic face turned into a frown before smiling and turning back to face the advisor. If I were anyone else, Advisor Danzo, I would take greater offense to that than I have and promptly gutted you in the street. However, at the moment, I have things to do and food to cook for my master. So, you can certainly try, but greater men have tried and failed. She says, remembering the 1500 player invasion of Nazarick. She turns on her heels and leaves. But CZ Delta. CZ Delta was usually an emotionless robot at the best of times and murderous robot at the worst of times. Right now, she was currently walking around with a certain fox in her hands, small and fluffy with 9 tails. This was the great, or rather, former great Kurama, the former QB no Kitsune. And at the moment, he was being crushed in the arms of CZ Delta, on his forehead was a small little sticker. Though she would eventually loosen her grip as she was trying to learn not to crush things in her grasp, though it was hard at times. Oh, you have Kurama today? Mare asks with a smile, holding his staff in hand as she turns to face the small mage and nods. Seemed lonely, thought I'd walk him around the tomb. Keep him company, she says as Mare nods at this. She remembered when Kurama had first came unto Nazarick, he was basically a byproduct of Lord Naruto's transformation, so he was treated with the near same respect as any other resident of Nazarick since he technically came from Naruto. Though that didn't save him from being crushed in CZ Delta's grip at times. She was getting better. I am the great Kurama Ak. He began only to be crushed again as she thought this was cute and pulled him into her chest more as Mare could only sweat drop at the scene. She was glad that Kurama was getting affection, but now that affection was in the death of Delta. Any plans for the day, CZ? He asks her before she shook her head in the negative. Patrol is done. Intoma has taken over. Free for the day, she says as he nods in response to this. Heard rumors your sister will confess to Lord Naruto, she says robotically as Mare gave a small smile at this, wanting the best for his sister as he nods. I heard that too, though it was from the regular maids, so I don't know how true it is, though he still has to pick out a wife for his own heir, doesn't he? He asks curiously as CZ nods in affirmation at this. Albedo and Shalltear are at the top. Aura no doubt close behind if she does confess. Though who he is with is his decision. She says as the magic caster nods at this as well. It'll be interesting to see who he picks. At the moment though it's anyone's game, he says as CZ nods. I've got to go. I have a mission from Demiurge. Wish me luck, he says as she nods at this, which is her version of wishing the boy luck as he teleports out of there to do what he needed to do. Kurama at the moment recovered, now in a softer grip as he decided to just be quiet as it would be a lot easier. But Naruto, a few days later. He awoke with a soft groan as he rubbed his head. He had been doing a lot of thinking about his own feelings and wondering about what to do. He loved them all, he was pretty sure, and they would no doubt be okay with sharing him, but at the moment he had to come to terms with that, which was easier said than done at times as he ran his left hand through his hair before he then felt something on his right hand and jumped when he saw very nude, save for her underwear. And very good-looking Albedo cuddled up to his arms as he wanted to jump out of her hands and ask why, but decided to be level-headed about this. Albedo. Wake up, he says to her as she groans lightly, and her eyes fluttered open as she aroused from her sleep as her eyes met with Naruto's. Lord Naruto. Did you sleep well? She asks as she sat up, not bothering to hide her modesty as the blanket fell. He is looking away at the moment as to give her a sense of decency at the moment. I slept fine, Albedo. What are you doing in my bed though? He asks her as she looks at him. I thought you would enjoy waking up next to me so you can take advantage and ravish me to your heart's content and give me an heir, she says with a giddy little grin as he sighs to himself as he looks at her for a moment as he ran his hand through his hair. Albedo, you do know I care for you. I dare to say I love you, but I'm worried that this is still the grief talking, Albedo. That the only reason you and Shalltear love me is because I am a remnant of Ainz. I don't want this to be a fake love is all MMPH. He was surprised when Albedo took his cheek into her hands and pulled him into a very deep and extremely passionate kiss. He eventually went slack into her hands before he started to kiss her back. He really hoped this was her admitting to him that this was not the grief talking. The two continued their make-out session for a while longer before she pulled away and smiles. It is not my beloved. Ainz will always have a place in my heart. But I think he would be happy that I found love elsewhere, you too. You were a son to him after all, she says as he looks at her for a moment longer before he pushed himself to her for another kiss, his hands reaching out and taking her hands and pinning them above her as he moved atop of her, their tongues intertwining as he moaned. MMMMPH, she moaned into the kiss, taking this as an acceptance of her feelings as she went slack under her lord's grip. I love you too, they both spoke through their kisses. But Pandora's actor was considered to be very intelligent, not in the way as Albedo or Demiurge. They had their strengths and weaknesses. No, his strength was in the lateral thinker kind of way. He was able to look at problems in a variety of different angles and come to conclusions some wouldn't think of or come up with solutions that others couldn't. Which is why Naruto trusted him as well as the two aforementioned guardians. At the moment he was currently walking the streets of Sunagakure. He had gotten permission from Lord Naruto to do what he felt he needed to do in order for the plan to work. Of course, he had to bring someone with him and be prepared to bug out if the time came that he couldn't handle himself in one way or another. He was currently wearing a regular civilian disguise as he walked the village and looked around. Besides him was Sebas, who was doing the same. They were here as an information gathering mission to size up the different villages and make sure they weren't threats or the like to Nazarick. Both of them knew of course the villages weren't any threat to Nazarick, but more the fact that they had to be sure. Pandora's actor of course had to turn down his eccentricity for the duration of the mission, but that worked out just fine for him as he knew when a job had to be done and when he could be eccentric. What are you thinking, Sebas? Asks Pandora's actor as he turned to the man and raised a brow at this. I don't like this if I am honest. I see a lot of poverty, resentment toward someone or something as well. From what I can gather initially, the economy is bad and it is trickling downward, he explains as Pandora's actor nods at this as well. He had come to the same conclusions as Sebas, and while he was more neutral compared to Sebas to humans, it was still hard to see kids without food to eat. They pose a risk, Sebas. Pandora's actor saying, already knowing the answer, but he would like Siba's 2 cents on the matter before they moved on to the next village. From what I see, no, in all honesty. But I have been wrong before, so let us not take any chances with this village, he says as Pandora's actor nods as they began to make their way out of the village. Pandora's actor was considered to be a very smart being by human standards, and he could understand motivations clearly. But what he couldn't understand when he heard screaming was a kid who had killed his comrades. 16 years of age with a mop of red hair. But it's not who he is that drew their attention. It was the energy they felt from him. On Hagakure, 1 week later. Here is inside as he read over the report that Kakashi had sent him. He had a bad feeling about the C rank he had sent them on and pushed it to the back of his mind. It was only a C rank, what was the worst that can happen? But no, Team 7 had to run into the damn demon brothers and the Uchiha had refused to abandon the mission. And normally this would cause a reprimand, but he didn't want any stink from the council, not that he usually gave a damn what they thought, but he didn't want the regular civilians to suffer because they raised a tax on their goods or some shit like that. Pat. He calls out as he watches the Anbu step out from the shadows and in front of him on one knee, ready to receive any orders he gives her. Go get Uzumaki Naruto, ask him to get 2 denizens of Nazarick as well, I want to make sure this mission goes off without a hitch, he says as she lets out a hi before she disappeared. He rubbed his face in exasperation as he pulled out a scroll and began to write in it. He was glad that he had written a will not too long ago, because if this kept up for any period of time, he was sure he would have a heart attack. Though Hess sure that Naruto could revive him, he didn't want to go until he saw his biggest mistake rectified. Orochimaru. It wasn't long before Kat returned, once again kneeling. He said he will be here in moments with a team. She says as he nods in response to this as he waves at her, a thanks and dismissal as she disappeared back to where she was, in the shadows protecting Hiruzen from any imminent danger. He continued to write in the scroll before he uses a bit of wind chakra, however little control he had, to dry the ink and smiling at this before he watched Naruto show up. He was glad that he had gotten a roster of who the denizens were, which only he had access to, since it was under a blood seal. From what he remembered, the 2 that flanked him were Albedo and Lapus Regina Beta. A defensive powerhouse and a healer. A deadly combination to be sure. Ah Naruto-kun, as I'm sure that Kat has told you, I have a mission for you, he says as he picks up the scroll he just wrote and tosses it to them, which was caught by Lapus Regina. She opened it and began to read it. Team 7 had gotten themselves into quite a bit of a mess with their C-rank mission, and I want you to act as backup for them. Do whatever it is you have to complete the mission. I'm sure you 3 can handle it alone, but this will look good to the other villages that are genin can handle a C-turned-A rank mission, if what my gut is telling me is true, he says as Naruto grins at this. So this just isn't an ego booster for Team 7 then, this a publicity stunt to the other villages. Sneaky old man. Very sneaky, he says with a laugh. This scroll says that we are to work alongside the Jonin to complete the mission, does that mean he can order us around? Lupus said curiously. Well, technically he could, Hot Aki-san isn't like that and will no doubt leave you to your own devices. Though Uchiha-san might try to push his weight around, though it's usually all bark and no bite, Hiruzen says as he picks up the pipe and takes a puff before setting it down and chortles. Your parents would be proud of you Naruto-kun. To see how strong you've become. Even if it isn't for the village's sake, he says with a small smile. I like to think so. I have a hell of a memory to live up to. He says with a small sigh before his eyes harden once more, he is going back into leader mode. Team 11 is prepared to move out on your orders Hokage-sama, he says as Hiruzen's eyes harden as well. Granted. Your mission parameters are set. Good luck. All of you, he says as they turn and walk out. As soon as the doors close, Hiruzen slumps. Lucky Naruto-kun, such beautiful women. So this part ends here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, so quickly like this video for second part of this series. And comment down below your thoughts about this series. And now it's time for me to go, bye.